Hello, I'm back to talk to you all about different ways of working increases. Now, there's many different ways to work increases. Some of them show up more than others, but you should have a selection in your toolbox so that you can pick which type of increase works best for the project that you're working on. So let's talk first about knitting into the front and back, which is abbreviated as KFB. To work this increase, you're going to knit into the front of the stitch like you normally would. Make that loop onto your right hand needle, but don't remove the loop off of your left hand needle. You're then going to work into the back of that loop and create a second stitch. So you've made two stitches in one stitch, and you can remove that off your left hand needle. And you'll see that this particular type of increase then has added one stitch to your stitch count. If I knit just regular knits for the next two stitches, you'll see that what happens with the knit into the front and back increase is that it winds up creating what looks like a purl bump. So this type of increase, while it's very easy and quick to work, does sometimes leave you with an extra show-off type stitch that you will see as you work on things like stockinette. It may be a great way to tuck in an extra stitch if you're working in a cabled pattern or a pattern that has other texture, but just be aware that you will have this extra little bump that shows up when you work that type of increase. The next type of increase that I wanted to talk about is a lifted increase, and you'll see this written as either a make one right or make one left, which is abbreviated as M1R or M1L. To work this type of increase, I'm going to knit two extra stitches to move us along a little further. You're going to be looking for this bar that's in between two stitches on your previous row. So here is the stitch I have just worked. This is the stitch on the previous row, and I'm going to be looking for this bar right here. You're going to use your needle tip to pick this bar up. This type of increase is going to lean one way or the other. So if I place the stitch onto my needle this way so that the bar comes up and over the top, and then I take my needle, right hand needle point, and I knit into the back loop of that lifted stitch. So here's the lifted stitch right here, and here's where I'm knitting into the back. That stitch is going to lean to the right. Let me work another two stitches so you can see how that's going to look. So it's this stitch right here, and it has a right leaning orientation. If I were to do the same process where I pick up the bar between two stitches, and I'm going to basically put a twist into this bar by placing it on my needle in that fashion. You do that again. So I lifted it. I came through using my left hand needle into the back of this bar and put it on this needle, and then knit into the front like you would any normal stitch. This is going to give me a left leaning stitch. So you can see there's a very slight difference. This stitch leans this way. You can see how that opens up and moves to that side. And this stitch, which is the left leaning stitch, moves to that side. Now there's one other way that you can work a leaning, left leaning or right leaning stitch that's a bit simpler, and does not require that lifted increase, which sometimes is hard to pick up if your yarn is very splitty, especially if you're trying to come in through the back of that lifted stitch. You also have the option to use the stitch below the one that you would be knitting. So let's say that I wanted to make a right leaning stitch. I would pick up the leg of the actual knit stitch, so I'm not picking up the bar. I'm picking up the stitch right here from the row below, and I'm going to place that on my needle. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to knit into that stitch, and then when I knit the next stitch, you'll see that this one has been created to the right of it. If I wanted to make a left leaning stitch without using the lifted bar increase, I would work the stitch that I would be working next on my needles, and when I'm ready to work the increase, then I would pick up that same loop going in from the front to the back and knit into that stitch. And that would give me my left leaning increase. So you can see again that this one is off to the right and this one is off to the left. This type of increase does wind up giving you a slight hole for the right leaning increase and that same little purl bump for the left leaning increase. So working the lifted bar increases that we did here is a more subtle increase. Working the left and right increases as we've done here winds up either with a little tiny hole or with a purl bump. So the least noticeable version of increases that we've worked are the lifted bar increases. And remember again, the knit front and back increase that we worked also winds up with a small purl bump. So that gives you an idea about several different ways that you can increase depending on what your pattern tells you to do or how much you want to see or not see your increase. You now have 3 different choices to pick from that you can use at different points in time. Hope that's helpful.